Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Let's dive into today's conversation regarding life's myriad transitions and how we refine our responses in our relationships, our wellness, our households, our work, and in our practices. You are invited to learn and love and listen with me. Welcome to Practice You. Welcome back to the podcast. What a special episode I have for you today. Cory Allen is an author, podcast host, influencer from Austin, Texas. He writes daily thoughts on mindfulness and mental clarity for his pretty impressive Instagram following. If you are impressed by such things, his handle is Hey Cory Allen. And I want to say I recommend that you actually open up your Instagram right now as you're listening to us. Just look at whatever he's offering of late because it's always uplifting. It's always helpful. He's reaching over 1 million people a week that way, and I'm so happy to hear it because that gives me hope for this planet. Cory's been featured in the New York Times, and why we're here together today is his book, Brave New You. It has moved me to tears multiple occasions. It is going to be a Christmas gift for all of the young people in my life, as well as some of the old people like me that I love. Cory, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Thank you so much. This has been the most enjoyable intro that I've heard so far. So thank you for that.
How nice.
I've really just been looking forward to being here with you on the podcast because it's the type of space, it's the type of energy that really is where I feel at home. So thank you for that. And thank you for having me here.
You're very much at home right here. This book I've dog-eared to within an inch of its life. I want to just introduce the fact that this is not a book that is super woo-woo or sort of magical thinking, even though I'm about to use the word magic. This is a book that I want to give to every graduate of either high school or college. It's a book I want to give to every friend of mine who's having a hard day. So hear me out. Page 5. This book is going to show you how to be active and make you happen to life. It's going to take you from knowing that more is possible to living like more is possible. For a lot of people right now, especially our young people, this is a ridiculous conversation to be having. I was overhearing my son and a friend of his recently in a car ride, and they were talking about whether or not they were going to have kids. And one of them said, oh my God, the world is going to be over by then. And with total seriousness, like there is such a finite awareness, so different from what you or I felt when we were that age. And I thought it might be interesting to talk to you about how you've sort of emerged from that time when you were, let's say, 17 or 18, to now writing a book called Brave New You.
Oh, wow. I do think that that's always fascinating whenever I hear people say the world is going to be over. It just always makes me think of George Carlin, where he says, no, the world will be fine. People will be over.
Will be over. Totally. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I mean, how did I go from there to here? The most concise answer I can give, it's very complex. Whenever I was 17, 18, I was kind of like what I would describe an optimistic nihilist. Maybe an optimistic misanthrope. I don't know. And of course, that's just that the negative aspect of that was coming from a place of trauma and from ultimately a place of creating a veneer intellectually and emotionally to try and insulate myself from vulnerability from the outside world. So,
the intellectual and emotional veneer. The insulation.
Yes.
Ode to veneers.
Ode to veneers. They're everywhere.
The trauma that you endured as a kid, I won't ask about it unless you would like to talk about it yourself.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's tricky. I try and keep it classy. I don't talk about those things unless I'm asked, and I try to speak about it with enough generalities to where the point is clear as to why I'm talking about it, not to try and have any public blame or anything like that. It's more of for the sense of giving someone else who might have experienced a similar thing comfort and a sense of being seen, and also a feeling of belief that there is a way to move beyond the things that perhaps they still are attached to in terms of ideas about themselves, about the world, or so forth. Ultimately, what I experienced in the shortest form was just a lot of emotional abuse, manipulation, conditional love, the use of fear to keep me from being an inconvenience to a certain level of narcissism.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, oh, sure, yeah.
That is, by the way, extremely a classy way of describing what you went through as a kid, and a lesson for all of us, particularly if those people are still alive.
Yeah, one of them is,
Right.
One of them is. If I were to share details, it would just bum everyone out, too.
Well, the truth is, to some extent, pretty much any one of us have experienced something like this, whether it was our first grade teacher, a parent, a sibling, a friend, a grandparent. Like, this is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not getting better. I mean, it's starting to get better because of authors like you and thinkers like you and Diego and Mikkel and so many other people. Like, this is the beginning of more of us seeing what narcissism looks like up close and how to manage it with kindness and with dignity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's wild. It's beautiful that the conversation has become, as you said, public, to where, really over the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years has this really gone into high gear, in my view. It's like it's become a part of the lexicon, the comfort and conversation about trauma, about what we've experienced, about, filling in and sharing information through, the technological means that we have to, I wouldn't necessarily say in terms of social media, the depth of social media is often not possible because of the delivery system. But what it does is it raises the awareness of particular concepts and ideas so that one can then go explore them more deeply, and wherever they find it relevant to them, which is an incredible, autodidactic sort of tool that we have at our disposal now.
And books like this that sort of show the way for somebody who might be reading it. I mean, you go so far as to say on page 5, this book is a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it will start where you are today. It will guide you through everything you need to know to leave behind what's keeping you stuck and start living a life that feels right to you. You'll get there faster than you think. You go on to say that you've meditated daily for 25 years. Okay. To prepare for this book, you've talked to hundreds of the world's leading experts in psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, mindfulness, personal development on your own podcast. Will you, by the way, tell us what that podcast is called so that our listener can come and find you as well?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sure. It's called And Then It Hit Me. So just in the sense of having an insight. Back in the day, it was called The Astral Hustle.
Oh, wow. The Astral Hustle.
Yeah.
That says a lot about you and your development. Actually, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I called it that 12 years ago because I was trying to think of something that was like a double entendre and also that was so silly and fun that no one would think I took myself too seriously.
Of course.
And then I just decided to change it after 10 years. But I might change it again.
That's your right. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's called Brave New You. You have meditated for 25 years daily. If you were talking to let's say a 16, 17, 18-year-old person who has never meditated a day in their lives, what would you say to sell meditation to them?
I would say that with an incredibly small amount of effort, you would gain a lifetime's worth of value in the ability to live each moment of your life with clear intentionality.
Thank you. That's great. And now, if you're listening and you're older than 16, 17, or 18, you just got a really good elevator pitch for meditation if you've fallen off the wagon or need to get on. In the opening part of the book, you say, we're going to do some mental house cleaning. So in the first section, you'll learn how to release mental stories that give you anxiety and make you imagine negative outcomes. Anyone? Bueller? And I know you probably don't like the word teach, but you will learn how to stop overthinking so you can make clear, stress-free, authentic decisions. You'll learn how to control your impulsive thoughts so that what you say and what you do are actually in alignment. This is something I've been talking to several folks about, the tendency that we have to tell weird, small lies that sometimes lead to big ones. Use free writing practices to connect with yourself and gain power over your thoughts. The only place you want power over anything is right there. You'll break the habit of creating negative self-fulfilling prophecies. You'll free yourself from feeling imposter syndrome. Wow. So you can live boldly and with confidence. And you'll embrace your quirks so that what's unique about you becomes your strength. You'll let go of self-consciousness so that you can feel grounded in who you are. You'll manage your reactions so you can live in the present instead of staying stuck in the past. So beautiful. And that's just the first part of the book. There's a second part and a third part, which we'll talk about momentarily. There's actually also fourth and fifth. I wish I could bring this to all the AA meetings. I just came back from this morning's meeting, and a dear friend of our family has just reached 6 months of sobriety.
Wow.
It's a beautiful story. I've shared a little bit about it. It was a friend of my son's who they're now sort of estranged from one another, but somehow they're coming back to one another. I know it. In the next few months, proper amends are being made, the steps are being taken, and so forth. But this book belongs in the hands of every recovering addict and alcoholic. I just can't really thank you enough for bringing the clarity that you've brought even just to this first part. And I thought I would ask, because I think this is probably one of the most important things that we can let go of, is this sense of imposter syndrome. People ask me about this all the time. And they say, I just feel fake. I feel like a fraud. I feel like I shouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing. I'm not qualified enough to do the work that I'm doing. And I wonder what you have to say about this.
Yeah, it's a huge one, particularly in the environment in which we all live right now. Whenever we have a huge portion of our reality is looked at through the window of a flat screen, and we're all looking online. We're looking at other people's lives. And of course, everything that you see online it's relatively false. It's curated in some way to give a particular impression. And we see what people are projecting, the image of themselves in the story that they want to be, kind of narrativized around their lives. And generally that is full of, the best moments and quotes, the most ideal, valuable things. This is, as a sidebar, one of the reasons why I keep my social media aesthetic extremely austere, is because it's just the ideas. I'm not trying to sell me or make myself seem anything other than just exactly what I am. And so, given that we live in this comparison culture, and then also, one of the huge elements of human life is status. It's just a core feature of our minds, because if we look at it from an evolutionary psychology point of view, we're consistently trying to understand how we fit into the pack, where we fit in the hierarchy, and what that means for us, and how we can kind of progress and move and feel strong, but also feel safe, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very complicated, having this unnatural level of awareness of other people whenever we are designed to compare ourselves to others by nature. Mm-hmm. I would say that in terms of imposter syndrome, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. One entry point is considering if you're invited into a situation. Let's say that you mentioned someone feeling like, I'm not qualified to be doing the work I'm doing. Well, first off, here's a secret. No one is really qualified to be doing the work they're doing. A part of life, a part of just being human, is we always need to be figuring out things as we're going. And that's unavoidable because life is always changing and flowing. So, the world in which we live, there's always surprises, there's always the unexpected, there's always new things to consider, there's always new complexities. And so, because we're living amongst that, it can make one feel unprepared and unqualified because, like, oh, well, I'm not anticipating everything that's happening to me. I don't know the answers to everything. Well, you know what? No one does. It's not possible. It's not the way in which life works. And so, recognizing that some figuring out along the way and getting in there and just being that person, that's a part of life. Also, if you're in the situation where you feel perhaps you're around other people who are too esteemed, let's say you're at a VP level in some corporation, and then you get brought into an executive level and you feel like, oh God, like I can't have the same confidence and everything. I don't deserve to be here at this level. I would say, consider that you were invited to that level for a reason. It didn't happen by accident. And this is the same thing. We could map this over to a social situation. If someone invites you to a party or something or whatever it is, and you're like, oh, I don't really know. Those people are pretty cool. I'm not that interesting. I don't know if I really deserve to be there. It's like, you weren't invited on accident. You were invited because the people who invited you to this new layer in your life want you to be there. In fact, you're generally probably invited to a new level in life because you're exceeding more than the people who are already there, and you're sticking out, and that's why they want to bring you to that level. And then another perspective on it is looking at how you're feeling in the moment in terms of not feeling like you're capable of being or doing whatever it is that you're doing. I would say there's nothing that negative thoughts hate worse and hate more than facts. So if you're in a moment where you start feeling that self-doubt, that kind of crippling sense of anxiety of like, how am I going to do this? I don't belong here. I can't do this. Stop and slowing down, zooming out, and let's look at reality. Let's take a moment to actually close the gap between our imagination and what is actually happening. Generally, you will find that there is absolutely no supporting information to support that sense and that feeling and that belief that you're forming for yourself that you aren't capable. If you look at it and you say, oh, I can't go do this, okay, where's the information for that? Where's the proof of that? There isn't any. It's just your anxiety trying to protect you and keep you from being vulnerable. So it's preparing you with all these thoughts so that you'll be on guard. It's not actually happening in reality. And zooming out and being aware of just really the physical nature, the real existential sense of what is very clarifying because it makes a sharp contrast between what's really happening in reality and what's just happening in your imagination.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. I can't recall who taught this, but it was a teaching sort of like, okay, name 3 things that are here.
Mm.
And then name 3 things that aren't here. Oh, I wish I could remember. It's so fascinating how much research I'm doing right now and reading, so I can't recall what is here, and just sort of laying out the facts of what's present. And then what's not here, laying out the facts of what's not present. For example, here I have a computer, 2 wires, a microphone, your book in my hands. What's not here? The future. What's not here? My son falling off a mountain on a pair of skis.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like the things that my mind conjures up. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually how I cured my own anxiety. Apart from the lifetime of meditation, but it was very useful to me. I had horrible anxiety as a kid and a teenager, and I was in my early 20s just feeling super anxious. And I was sitting there on my couch, and it's interesting, through meditation, you develop this sense of self-awareness where, you're watching your mind. You're always sort of observing the texture of your mind, even whenever it's unfolding in undesirable ways. You're still kind of observing it, at least I always am. And so I noticed my mind going from feeling fine to feeling really anxious. I noticed my heart started beating really fast and my palms started sweating. And I started looking around and thinking through what it was that was making me anxious, and checked my breathing, slowed down, calmed down, relaxed, and was able to stabilize again. And then I considered, like, if there was a camera in this room, what would it have filmed? What would it have seen? And it would have been a guy sitting on a couch and absolutely nothing happening for 10 minutes. Right? But in my mind, there was this whole journey, this experience of calmness to fear and freaking out and the world becoming scary and etc., going back down to being calm again. And thinking about that made me just explode into laughter. It's so preposterous that what really happened was I was a guy sitting on a couch.
You said, this is how I cured my anxiety apart from 25 years of meditation. And I want to just offer that maybe during those 25 years of meditation, you saw this happen enough times, this still guy on a couch freaking out, that you became more able to discern what thoughts you're going to go with and what thoughts you're not, which gave rise to this book. I'm on page 76 now, skipped forward a lot. All the things that we just sort of talked about got covered in that first section of the book. You write, it's important to keep an eye on your relationship with self-help culture, taking the help that culture is serving you instead of listening to your inner voice and finding the next important step can jam you up. Someone will always be out there telling you what you need and what will improve your life. And I think this is sort of the crux of this conversation. Yet to make real growth, it's crucial to understand what you need in your life at the moment and act accordingly. I think the ask of this book is to turn so far inward that you can see all the way inside to what is actually appropriate, an appropriate response for you right now, not what somebody else is doing and not what somebody else is saying you should do. And it's a tall order.
Yeah, I really like that you highlighted that. It surprised me whenever you started reading that, because I think that's one of the most important quick little passages in the book. And you nailed it. It is the beginning of the foundation of the real core premise in terms of how the book finishes. But what's funny about that is I have brought that topic up on a variety of podcasts and also just in casual conversation with other public figures who are writers in the space. No one really seems to like to talk about that idea. So I'm glad.
I'm really glad you're glad. But in its purest sense, if we are saying this, what we're suggesting to you, our listener, is shut it down and go walk outside. Go sit down and be quiet. You've heard what you needed to hear. Mm-hmm. Basically.
Yeah, totally. That, and I'd like to add just a little spice to that, is that, like, because there's so much information out there and people are offering this, you have so many writers and public figures and podcasters offering all these different ideas. It's endless, right? And what happens generally is that people who are offering these ideas, they're doing it, I would say, with good intentions. However, one thing that naturally happens, even on a subconscious level, is an individual is going to seek to, of course, become more popular, to get more attention, to grow their brand, to do all this type of thing. What will happen in that is they will start leaning towards ideas that are sticky, that have a shareable quality to them in the zeitgeist, that are trending and so forth. And while those ideas might not be invaluable, or should I say not valid, they tend to turn into these themes, almost memes of self-help culture. As I considered what the implications of that would be on an individual, this is something I do a lot. I put my mind in the mind of the prospect, of the user, of the reader, and really go there of, like, what is their consciousness like? What are they experiencing? And what will what they engage with mean to them, right? So I'm picturing if someone who is struggling and they're looking for some type of information, some type of soothing, some type of even feeling related to by these ideas. And they see this kind of menu of things that everyone is saying. And of course, confidence is another big selling point online. They go, here's the 10 things you have to do to optimize yourself and to feel better. You wake up at 5 a.m. and view sunlight, and then get in the cold plunge, and then eat this, and then go do this exercise, and then whatever, X, Y, and Z, and so forth and so forth. Then what can happen is, if those things aren't what a person particularly needs in that moment, they might begin to feel isolated, and they also might begin to feel like, well, I mean, what's up? I did these 10 things that everyone is reposting saying you do these things, or you use these thought tools and they'll make you feel better, and I don't feel better. So there must be something fundamentally wrong with me. And I consider that part of that kind of human quality that's in all of us. And I want to make it clear that there is still a marketplace happening with ideas and with, the culture that's evolved, and that marketplace isn't necessarily always going to be relevant to the individual, because the individual is not the group. They are just them. And so they might not need what's popular. And so the most important thing to do is, as you said, to look inward and try and understand, what do I need right now? And then go seek out those particular things that will serve them.
There are two practices, well, one particularly that you offer that really struck me as useful, and I've never heard it talked about in quite this way before. You speak about free writing as a way to, quote, externalize our thoughts. Okay, I've done this before, I've read, heard about this before, I've even done the practice before. But the word externalizing really changed something for me. And in recent weeks, I've just been going through a lot of change and transition, both around me and within me, and I can't stop crying, and things are just so tender and so beautiful and short. Might have something to do with chaplaincy and the number of hours that I'm spending in hospice. But I'm like, everything is so beautiful. Everything is so tender and special and beautiful, and none of it is. All at once.
Right.
But writing that down and writing my Substack every week has helped me to see what thoughts are valuable, what thoughts are really hurting me and others around me, and what thoughts I want to take forward. And this is one of the core practices of the book, and I would love for you to talk about it for our listeners so that our listener can take this one, whether they buy the book or not, which of course we would love for you to do, our listener, so that our listener can take it with them, this practice.
Yeah, interestingly, I want to address you mentioning the way that you've been feeling. I've been feeling that way too the last month. And I don't know if it's in the air or if we're just both experiencing things which are influencing that. But just to connect on that, in terms of the practice, we feel like our thoughts have a lot more power and generally meaning than they really do, because our thoughts and our emotions are connected. When we have a thought, we generally have an emotional response to it, or vice versa. But what happens is that we then mistake the emotion that's arising with the actual material of the thought. And so the emotion makes the thought seem more intimidating, more scary, less meaningful, more meaningful than it really is. And it really just turns it into kind of this funhouse mirror. So it's difficult for us to get clarity on what the actual thing is that we're thinking is. And that's why it makes it to where thoughts have so much power over us. You mentioned your intrusive thought of your son, having an accident while skiing in a mountain. Well, the emotion that's connected to that thought amplifies that thought, which isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
It's not happening, but the emotion connected to it makes it feel huge and scary, and elicits an actual emotional and physical response from you, which, if unchecked, then influences how you act in the world, which then influences your real life and who you are. So being able to catch those things upstream and work with them before they start to kind of possess you and change your mindset and your behavior is really valuable. And also, it's a great way to eliminate a lot of just kind of personal suffering that we may have. So taking this practice of free writing, this is just writing out your thoughts with complete freedom. No punctuation. Don't worry about it making sense. It can be long, rambling sentences. It can be little fragments. Anything that's arising in your mind, You just write it down. And if a person feels like they don't know where to start, I can give you an example of, how to kind of open the dam, as it were. If you just put your hands on the keyboard, or if you care to use a pen and paper or whatever, just literally start describing what happened. What did you do? What happened this morning? How are you feeling? So you would just be like, oh, I woke up this morning. I had coffee. I went on a walk. Now I'm sitting here doing a podcast. That's interesting. Oh, well, podcasts are interesting. I wonder who's listening to this. I wonder, how this is going to influence people. I feel pretty good. I feel calm right now, and they're like, why do I feel calm? Well, I don't know. I think, and you just are literally just writing just the material of everything that's bouncing around in your mind. And you'll find that you will start moving into these kind of deeper grooves and thoughts that are happening in your mind. So if you need to practice of just getting that going, that's kind of a way that you can do it. But I would say that if you have a particular thought that is causing you anxiety or stress or disconnection, to write that thought down on paper. And by doing that, you're externalizing the thought and you're creating space between the emotional connection to the thought and what the actual thought is. So we're literally like in Harry Potter, we're taking the wand and we're taking the thought out of the mind and taking out of the body, dropping it onto the paper. So that way, whenever we look at it, we can see it more objectively. We're like forcing literal space between our thoughts and us.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Yes.
Wingardium Leviosa.
That's right. Yes. So the instant space makes it where we can objectively see it. And generally, what will happen is that gives us a chance to reset emotionally. We can see the thought for what it is. And what we usually find is that there's barely anything to the thought at all. Thoughts feel fully formed because a part of us is enamored that we have even thought of something to begin with. And that's why writing is so valuable, is because it's very self-clarifying. It very much shows you how you really don't have that many ideas a lot of times, even though it feels like you do. And so this is good. When you write out your thoughts, you'll see it was really just kind of nothing. And I just got anxious and attached to it. And a really fun experiment to just, if you want to really highlight this and take this experiment to the next level, is whenever you have something troubling or just anything that is coming into your mind at all, write it down, put it in an envelope, and go stick it in your desk. Come back 2 weeks and then read it. And it will be hilarious looking. It probably won't even make any sense. You'll be like, what was I talking about? Or you'll look at it and you'll go, that was what was sweeping me off my feet. The insight there is that the thought that seems so powerful, with that distance and that space, we've had time for life to filter through us, for more thoughts, more emotions to occur, for the whole narrative of our existence, as far as it's concerned to our mind, has shifted to a new story. We go back and look at this thing we wrote 2 weeks ago. It's not even us anymore. And when we can see that clearly, we can then remember that in the present moment, the next time that we're experiencing something like that.
Beautiful and helpful and true. I think when it comes to writing, I find that heavy editing is actually the whole game. I'll write a whole bunch of stuff down. By the time the thing gets published, it's like 1/6 of its length. It's been edited at least 6 to 8 times. And there's not one extra word in there. And I'm finding now that since taking up this practice of heavy editing, I'm looking back at writing that I did even 6 months to a year ago, and I'm going, oh my God, there are like 1,000 extra words in here that don't need to be there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And I have 2 more sort of tracks that I would love to walk down with you. And the first is 92, 93-ish. That's the page numbers in Brave New You. It's an incredible gift, you write, when you find the right friend or partner who gives you life. And if they feel the same energy too, it's a priceless connection. You are talking about being discerning about the relationships that we have, not necessarily romantic, it's with anyone. There are 3 different distinct styles or flows in relationships. The first is upward flow. This is a connection that is guaranteed to feed you. And if you're listening to us right now, you can start writing down the names of the people who are the upward flow. When you spend time with that person, you always walk away having learned something. You always feel supported by that person. You always feel energized, perhaps, by that person. However, this is interesting. The other person might not feel the same. Such a relationship, you write, is good for you, but can be draining for the other person. Okay, there is an antidote to this. Stay tuned. The second flow or style in relationships, downward flow. In these relationships, you always feel drained and sort of picked over afterward. When you're with this type of person, you feel like you're giving without getting anything in return. It doesn't mean that you dislike people who tend to drain you. It's simply apparent that you consistently feel low on energy after you're with them. Okay, so maybe write down, our listener, maybe one or two names of people who are in the downward flow category. It's not a judgment or a blaming. We're just writing down the facts of how things are flowing. But the third is really nice. And you might have some people in the upward flow category that you're going to consciously move into the synergistic flow category, third category. These relationships, you write, Cory, are golden. When you spend time together, both of you feel more energized. You can connect uniquely, bringing something special out in both of you. It creates an endless flow of ideas, positive vibes, and energy. These are people who can become lifelong friends or partners. I'm thinking of one of my best friends on earth now from Cornell, Dana Bauer. I'm thinking of Allie and, oh my God, several other people who shall remain nameless who might not want to be named, but definitely my partner, James. I'm seeing that you have that with your wife, Cory. And I'm wondering, can you give advice perhaps or offer some insight into someone who's picking up that they're either in an upward flow or downward flow relationship? How do we move those toward more synergy?
That is a good question. I don't know if we can change the real foundation of those types of relationships. I think that there are things we could do. We could try and be intentional and give more in relationships where we feel like we are the one always receiving. We can, in relationships where we feel like we're always giving, we can be more careful with the amount of energy that we give away in those relationships and put a bit more spacing and the times in which we engage with those people. But I'm not sure if we can actually totally change those relationships to synergetic ones. I wonder if it's a natural luck of the draw almost, where your puzzle edges have to meet their puzzle edges, and you have this contradictory but complementary flow of interests and ideas. And by contradictory, I mean that you are both interested in the same things but have different knowledge bases around them. So you get into this feedback loop of just helping each other grow and grow and grow more in the places where you have overlap. I'm not sure. I'm sort of thinking about if there's been any time where someone has gone from downward to synergetic, and I don't know that that's really happened for me. Has it ever happened for you?
Yes. I think that I was able to see where I was giving too much. In fact, in one relationship that comes to mind, I just stopped giving, and then suddenly the other person, sort of by the luck of the draw, as you said, rose up to meet me, and we still have a really great friendship. I have another question for you, though, because I see how this one is sort of unanswerable. Like each of us has to sort of work through this on our own and decide or choose, are we going to stick or are we going to go? And how can we at least know that we have given our all and then know when to sort of fold? But I'm asking, I said synergistic, and I'm just realizing that it's synergetic. And I would love to hear what that word means to you so that we can have a mutual understanding.
Oh, yeah. Just whenever two things are applied together, they create an energy that's stronger and different than the sum of the parts.
Versus synergistic, which I'm now going to look up right now because I got to. Synergistic, relating to the interaction or cooperation of two or more organizations, substances, or other agents to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. So it's similar. We're just talking about energy rather than some sort of result, I guess. Interesting.
Right.
Cool. Boy, do I love learning new words. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, me too.
Where did you go to college, by the way? I hate to ask, and also...
I didn't.
Oh.
I barely graduated high school.
God. So, that's so great.
Also, well, you'll like this one, too. I've never had a teacher or a coach. I never had a mentor.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the thing, it's actually in the book, too, is I say, once you start watching your mind, you'll never be without a teacher. So my mentor has been my meta-awareness. And I study myself like I'm like the Jane Goodall of my own consciousness. I'm like, ooh, look at what he's doing now. Interesting. Let's take notes.
Which brings me to page 218 I marked. Let's call what powers this capacity to make intentional choices your micro-intuition, page 219. Being purposeful about everything you do has massive compound effects on the big picture of life. How you speak, what you eat, who you're around, how you shift your mindset, how you practice self-care, how you approach your business. Much more all add up. In the beautiful pages of the Book of Tea, which, by the way, I would contest that this might be a mentor of yours, this book, Okakura Kakuzo poetically shares, what a beautiful book, why the traditional Japanese tea ceremony puts so much emphasis and ritualization on the small, seemingly meaningless aspects of preparing a cup of tea. Doing so serves as a reminder that we often overlook the importance, beauty, and power of the small routines of our day. And by applying intentional focus to them, we become present, grounded, in closer touch with the essence of reality. And as the saying goes, how you do anything is how you do everything. Even the way I've started to do this in front of James, and he's starting to pick up, and I haven't said anything, but even the way I set a plate down, a fork, a pair of chopsticks, the pot lid, everything. And slowly I'm watching him. There's a level of impatience in how long it's taking me to place this thing. I noticed it yesterday a couple of times. We were cooking together. And then, next thing you know, he's placing it just as carefully and slowly. And there's something magical about it. It's this wordless transmission, and it points to, the sort of teacherless function of watching your own mind and how you do anything.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's beautiful.
So cool.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And it's funny to watch. I find his life just to be like absurd, and I find everything hilarious in a good way. So I use those type of qualifiers a lot. But to me, it's funny. One other person might say it's interesting to see that wordless transmission, because you, having experienced the journey of that, recognize the frustration of the hurry upness and the attachment to trying to rush through whatever the kind of maintenance that you're doing to try and get to, quote unquote, get to the moment, and to be able to watch that tension and that desire to live in the future
instead of right now.
Soften.
Yes.
Soften. And then you see a person start realizing that the moment that they're actually trying to get to is just now. And it's not about what you're doing. It's about the mind in which you're engaging with what you're doing.
Final question. I'm on chapter 17. I've turned a few pages back to page 195, if you're following along, our listener. The name of this chapter is Redefine Yourself Often. And I cannot tell you, upon reading this chapter, how I thought of something that I've never really realized. I can't tell you how many times I get asked, well, you've changed teachers and traditions and practices and identities so many times. How do you do this with the level of sort of elegance and smoothness with which you seem to be doing this, as though it isn't actually happening, which is true to some extent. It's not ever smooth, but this is, I think, the crux of this life. You're right. People get used to the idea of who they are. They accept their self-perceived abilities, interests, what they think they can do to make themselves feel more alive. Accepting who you are right now for all that you ever will be does a great disservice to your future self. I'm sure you know this and agree. And if you were asked if you do this, you likely say no. Yet if we look at our habits, we'll often see that we limit ourselves without realizing it. We like to feel like we're allowing ourselves to be open and grow and move toward a higher version of who we are. But in reality, we're usually pretty stagnant. That's because above anything else, we like to feel comfortable. Life is complicated and exhausting, and it's hard to turn down the things that give us a sense of familiar safety. And while there's certainly a time and place for comfort, there also has to be balance. And you're right. If we're ever going to feel alive, in italics, like the wind is blowing at our backs, we're on the exciting edge of breaking through into another greater layer of our own existence, we have to seek out the new. Before we go further, you say, let's consider what it means to redefine who we are. And you go into some really beautiful points. It's not about buying new clothes or quitting our job or, becoming something in an impulsive way, which is really just a reaction. You're talking about smaller, more nuanced changes, you write, that add up to larger changes over time. For example, we're on page 196. We might notice ourselves entertaining negative self-talk before we do something important. In that moment, we can stop, recognize the story we're telling ourselves, and think, no, that is not who I am anymore. I have grown. I am capable, and I will not be a person who talks down to myself anymore. I underlined that. I highlighted it. And I think perhaps that might be the most important line of the book for me in this season. I will not talk down to myself anymore. Can you speak to this and where it came from within you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so beautiful hearing you read out of the book. So thank you for doing that. And I think maybe this just connects right with your question, is hearing you read it, I go, wow, this is beautiful. But when I'm writing it, I don't have the same type of ability to appreciate it,
Because it's you.
And exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. I'm writing from the heart and from the mind, but I can't appreciate it in the same way because it's me. That sense of not talking down to yourself and deciding that you're not going to think about yourself in those ways it's huge. I have struggled with, my entire life feeling unlovable, feeling a really weird mixture of low self-worth and high self-confidence. So figure that one out.
I know I've had that for sure. I know a lot of younger people who have that. Like I can see it all around me.
My take is that it comes from the environment that I grew up in and being forced to become hyper independent in a situation for kind of basically building a survival skill, but also recognizing from a young age that if I didn't teach myself, no one would. And so I become extremely self-reliant, and that built the confidence. But then, of course, the self-worth came from not feeling loved. And so, I've always used self-deprecation as a way to break the tension. Honestly, I know I'm such a, and I don't mean intelligent, but I mean, I'm such an intellectual thinking type of person that in my life, I have used the self-deprecation so that the people I'm talking to don't think I'm trying to be too technical or too granular with them. So it's to be a relief to bring it back to a human form. Whenever really I would prefer it to just be 0 1 1 1 0 1 1 1 1. That's how I would communicate naturally. But at a core level, even though I sort of feng shuied and made excuses of why it was okay to joke about being self-deprecating or even thinking about it to myself, at a certain point I had to confront the fact that it was an actual problem, that there's real pain into there. It's not coming from a place of, just of humor. It's coming from this real place of suffering. And that led me to this self-auditing, this thinking of taking claim for my own sense of self, of putting my foot down in the present to draw a line between the past and the future, and deciding then that I'm not going to treat myself the way that I was treated. I'm going to treat myself the way that I know that I deserve. And I don't deserve to just continue ushering on the reverberations of negativity that echo from, my childhood, and choosing to move forward as a person that recognizes that I am loved, that I am capable and valuable as a human being, that the people in my life care about me, and that I, a good person with very strong, I'm comfortable saying unshakable ethics and integrity. That's a core value of mine. And just sort of like laying it all on the table like that and choosing to use my mindful awareness then to not change, but just release. Just let go of that voice when it arises. One thing I've struggled with my entire life is not feeling attractive at all. Like at all. I've never been able to find myself attractive. Like I feel like I look weird and alien, and maybe I shouldn't have spent all that time as a teenager staring in the mirror on acid, but
Dude, first of all, we are both aliens. Do not put us down. Okay? Just saying. And the acid was probably a good idea also.
Yes. No, it was very useful. Yeah, just recognizing those patterns, and instead of trying to change them, just letting them go, and allowing truth to fill in the gap.
Thank you for that. There's a lot of value in this final chapter 17, our listeners, so be sure to get in there and keep rereading. Each paragraph is full, and you really did a wonderful job of editing. You say that the greats are great for a reason. The reason is that they are constantly learning how to be open and redefine themselves again and again and again and learn new things. I have so many examples of this in my own life when I didn't want to do the thing and then I go do it, and I literally am becoming another person again.
Mm-hmm.
As we speak. I'm like molting. I literally feel this. It's painful and tender and also necessary. But you say that the rejection of the invitation of the new, this numbing ourselves to life, to these opportunities, these portals, as you say, that we're to watch for, is one of the things that holds us back in this life and causes all of the other cascading chemistry of imposter syndrome and lack of confidence and all the other things that we've talked about previously in the book to happen. And I wondered, in terms of the portals to watch for, just to jump to a practical way so we can close at a reasonable hour, what are these portals to watch for, particularly when people are super stubborn and intractable and they think, no, I'm never going to change this part about me. I love this part about me. What do we watch for?
Well, I think if someone loves a particular part about themselves, then there's nothing wrong with that. But what one can do is take that forward with them into new territory. So we think about change, we think about the fear of losing the good qualities that we have that give us a sense of self and grounding and comfort. It's like, no, those aren't going anywhere. It's like if you go on a vacation, you don't leave your your hair and skin behind or whatever. You take it with you. These portals I'm talking about looking for invitations that arise in life. And I'll try and be concise as possible about this, but I have found the most transformative moments in my life have come from, it works like a Zen koan. It works because let's look at the structure of a Zen koan. You have two contradictory insights or ideas. By reading them and figuring them out in your mind, it is designed to generate a third thought that can only come from considering and squaring the contradiction of the two ideas. And in that function, the third thought arises as wisdom or insight. So these work in the same way. There's an aspect of yourself that is, I guess, valuable, where you feel like you have command, expertise, something that's meaningful to you. And then there is another aspect of self that has the same qualities, but yet those two things have not connected in your life before. You haven't thought of applying those two parts of yourself together yet. Something outside of you will arise that will be an invitation to apply those two parts of self together to create a new dimension, a new aspect of you. And when we take that invitation, we can become something that we never would have considered possible in a positive way, because we had yet to consider putting together those two parts of self. And I call them portals because they, as we walk through them, it sort of changes our reality. We step into another dimension in the sense that we symbolically think about ourselves differently, and we are now operating the world with new skills. I would say that as an example, just to kind of ground that into earth, in my early 20s, I was composing music. I had my own audio production company, and I went on a friend's podcast at the time, and all I ever did was talk about this type of stuff with my friends or anyone that would listen. There's some people that wouldn't listen. And I went on this friend's podcast, and all of his fans found my, I wasn't a public figure. They found my music production site and were emailing me saying, "Hey, you have to start a podcast. This is amazing." And I was like, I never really thought about that before. And now that's the invitation. If we want to look at it in a metaphysical way, we can say that's the universe reaching out and saying, "Hey, here's this portal." And then I look at it and I go, well, all I do is talk about this stuff with my friends. This is one aspect of self. And then I go, and I'm an audio producer that has a studio, and I already know how to produce, and I already have all the equipment to have a professional sounding thing. What if I put those two skill sets together and started becoming a podcaster?
Yeah. I'm also thinking of the opportunity. I've spoken about this before, just to reference something we touched on earlier, the opportunity to go sit in the AA room in this town. That was never in my plan. And when I had the opportunity to sort of informally sponsor this friend of our family, I found myself in the AA rooms, and I got so many insights from sitting in those rooms, so much hope for the planet, listening to the people, being so vulnerable, so self-honest, that it changed my work. It has propelled me in my chaplaincy training, just to be sitting in those rooms. Mm-hmm. And that's not something I really, quote unquote, wanted to do, but it has fed me and changed me, indeed. Last quote for today, and then I'll let you go, and thank you for staying so long.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Page 201, the inner landscape. I'm skipping down to how to spot these portals in the first place. Firstly, being mindful of your thoughts, feelings, actions. This raises your awareness of your inner landscape. By inner landscape, I mean the spacious playing field of activity that's going on inside of you at any given moment. Let's visualize this so you can see your inner landscape more clearly. Consider that there is a spacious presence in your mind and body at every moment. A spacious presence. In this space, you feel the physical sensations of emotions, like the fire of anger or the swelling warmth of love. You can also feel your intuition in this space. When you're in the middle of making a decision, you can feel a sort of magnetic pull in your stomach and heart area. Also, when you're putting energy into your intellect and trying to think of something, you'll feel churning in your mind. These feelings in our inner landscape are fascinating and insightful once you become aware of them. And as you turn your attention inward and start being more mindful of these sensations, you might first notice a lot of noise. That's natural. Think of your inner landscape as a garden. For your whole life, it's gone untended. Plants and weeds have grown wild. Now you're looking at these mental formations for the first time and seeing them overgrown. Don't let the messiness turn you off. Simply start paying attention to your inner world of thoughts and feelings. And like a garden, you'll start to get rid of the weeds by addressing what is arising in you. A beautiful thing happens after you pay attention to your inner landscape for a while. Once you've spent time with it and it's well tended, it will take on a clear and peaceful state of being. And with that peacefulness comes immense mental clarity. If we remember from earlier, mental clarity doesn't mean that we have a mind with no thoughts. It means we've tended to our minds enough to be aware of our thoughts as they arise. As we start experiencing this, our internal landscape becomes broad, open, and crystal clear. This spaciousness makes it incredibly easy to identify what arises in us at any given moment. It's just so beautiful and so well said. And I wonder if I might ask your permission to include that short reading in my Substack this week. It dovetails beautifully with what I'm writing about.
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. I'm going to include the link to your book's website too. It's called, and for our listener, it's bravenewYouBook.com. One word. No dashes or anything. bravenewYouBook.com. And that's where to get the book. And I think you gave a class on a couple of days ago that I had to miss because I was out with family. But I wonder if that's something you'll continue to do ongoing.
Yes, I will. I did a writing workshop that was really fun and covered a lot of ground and was able to really talk about some technical things, some more theoretical ideas around writing, some emotional connections, some finding your sense of identity and so forth. And yeah, I kept it pretty intimate as well. I think there was only I capped it at about 30 or 40 people. So it was a really nice, beautiful time. I'll definitely do that again. And if listeners go to that link that you offered, they can get 12 different guided meditations I created that are all progressive in their teaching. So they just continue to build on one another as you go through and listen to them. And I promise that it'll offer a very fun investigation into your own meditation practice. So those are available for you if you pre-order there.
And your intention is to have those 12 be chronological and successive.
Exactly.
Great. 108, brother. Thank you so much for everything, for your practice, most importantly, and for all the ways in which you have taken the time to externalize it for us and allow us to have the experience, really. It's an honor to know you and to have you here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, this has been really beautiful. I can't thank you enough for just going deep into the writing and really understanding it and sharing it in a way that is, honestly, it's been really meaningful to me. Hearing you talk about the book and the ideas in there it's made me just feel really grateful to be able to offer those things to people. And thank you for creating the space for that to happen and for sharing yourself with the world and making this podcast and this channel for connection something that's just really, really beautiful. And I'm certain causing really impactful ripples out there into the beyond.
May it be so. Until next time, bravenewYouBook.com. On Instagram, it's Hey Cory Allen, and I'm going to spell it for you, listener. It's HeyCoryAllen. Hey Cory Allen on Instagram. Thank you again so much, brother, for your time today and for staying long and for all of your heart's wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you.